I already told you that my preferred decorating style is with books, right? So, by the way, on the table on the left there, that's all Alexander Campbell stuff, either by him or about him. Things on the right are more maybe general histories. A couple other resources here. Renewing God's People by Gary Holloway and Doug Foster. It's a good, succinct summary. It's not a 600-page tome like some of the books over there. Good, succinct summary covering a lot of the material that I've been covering this week.
Repeat that.
Renewing God's People, a concise history of the churches of Christ. Doug Foster, Gary Holloway. And if you want to go really small, 38 pages. The Story of Churches of Christ by Doug Foster. It's a very, very brief outline for somebody who doesn't know anything about Church of Christ history, but maybe a little bit of interest. This might be a good place to start. I think it's ACU Press. I think like $5.99. So you can buy it in bulk and come out as Christmas gifts or something. I don't know. Also, I noticed that a lot of you enjoy writing your histories, the writing sessions you've had in the afternoon, writing about your personal history and your story, things like that. Well, if you enjoy getting into this from an autobiographical standpoint, a couple of good biographies. First of all, A Lover's Quarrel, My Pilgrimage of Freedom in Churches of Christ by Leroy Garrett. Leroy Garrett was born in 1919, and he passed away at the age of 96 in 2015. He came out of the 1919, out of the very right-wing part of the movement, very conservative, very strict, moved to the other side. It tells about that journey, and so I think you're going to recognize a lot of the stories and the mentalities in this. Another one very similar, Hearing God's Voice, My Life, the Scriptures, and the Churches of Christ, Thomas Albright. Thomas Albright, born in 1929, still alive, still speaking, still writing, still researching. The man is just world-class scholar. But these are books, just really enjoyable books. They talk about their childhood, growing up in Churches of Christ, and their family background, but they bring some theology in with their own personal narratives, their own personal spiritual journey. And so if you enjoy the autobiographies, these would be two that I might recommend. Tom Albright, Leroy Garrett. Okay, whoa, hey, what happened here? Okay, remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so here's our unity movement in the diagram. Now, others of you have talked about how churches have their own unique things, dividing over translations of the Bible. I was preaching one Sunday, and after church, a couple came up and said, "So what version of the Bible do you use?" And I said, "Well, I'm studying. I use Greek and Hebrew. When I'm preaching, I tend to use NIV." And they said, "Thought so." Turned around and walked out and never saw him again. Yeah. And you have the kitchens. Some of you remember the arguments about kitchens in the church, right? Not scriptural, they did not have one back in the. Okay, and those tend to divide churches, but there wasn't a movement. You didn't have the non-kitchen Sunday schools with their own publications and things. You didn't have the KJV publications. Those tend to be more on an individual basis. These are actual wings, different fellowships of Churches of Christ that tend not to fellowship with each other. Now, does the name Daniel Sommer mean anything to you?
Yep.
Daniel Sommer, back in the 30s, early 1900s, very much a rugged, tough, fighting conservative. Ira Rice, more recently, same kind of thing, axe through the trees. We're going to chop down anything that's not of God. So it's kind of fighting spirit's been kind of an issue. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
So we've looked.
My wife, by the way. Yes.
You've taken us through Churches of Christ,
Yeah.
that branch.
Yeah.
But if we went over to the Christian Disciples Church of Christ and we were exploring there, would we see these same kind of branches coming off of that?
Not so much, partly because the disciples are all about unity, right? And so they're focused on unity, and you're going to have a lot of diversity within the disciples of Christ churches because unity is their focus. However, what happened was, in the 20th century, as, I'm going to use this as a technical term, theological liberalism came into higher education. People were starting to ask questions about the Bible and who really wrote it and asking some questions like that. And so that began to have an impact on churches through the institutions. Well, the disciples of Christ very much bought into theological liberalism. It's not a dirty term. It's just saying that they advanced scholarship and accepted the most recent scholarship about who wrote the Bible, those kind of issues. The independent Christian churches were more hesitant on that. They were more conservative. And so there was a growing division between these two groups. And in 1968, there was a restructure of Disciples of Christ, and that's when, I think I put in a date into the handbook there about the first National Christian Convention of Christian churches. That's where they kind of broke off. So I always thought, growing up in the a cappella churches, a cappella churches of Christ, I always thought the Christian church was liberal because they had instruments. Right? And that's till I met one, and then a couple others. And I found they were actually much more conservative than me. Why? Because their whole thing was, our thing was instruments, right? That was the identifying factor. For the non-Sunday school, that was identifying factor. You could have instruments in a non-Sunday school church, many of them did, but Sunday school was the bugaboo. So for independent Christian churches, it was this whole idea of scholarship and liberalism, and so they came out very anti-scholarship. Independent Christian churches, their colleges are not liberal arts colleges like your college or ACU or Harding. They're Bible colleges. Until you get one degree pretty much, Bible, because they're hesitant to use this. So there was some division, but not the multiplication like we see in churches of Christ.
And I'm asking, were other groups able to avoid a lot of this minutia, fracturing kinds of stuff? Because they were more centralized, there was a voice that spoke for the Baptists,
Yes.
for Presbyterians and stuff.
You had to pass a vote, Enough people didn't like the vote, then they would split and form their own organization. You're not going to have this fracturing and splintering in multiple directions like
They had
we
a greater capacity to speak for the group
Right.
from a position of hierarchy.
Because if you're going to be a Baptist or a Methodist, right, you have to agree to certain things, right? And you can decide not to be a Baptist or Methodist, but because we're just Christians only, and you get to decide for yourself what you think the Bible teaches, that's the problem. Or is it? Let's go back to this idea. Raccoon John Smith, Bart W. Stone, they acknowledged we had different ideas about some things that were pretty significant, and yet they said what we have in common is greater than what divides us. And because they believed in the scriptural practice of unity, they said, we're not going to let these differences divide us. In fact, we're going to unite in spite of them. And so when I talked about getting back to New Testament Christianity, that's, I think, one of the things we've missed. We've done a great job in some areas of talking about baptism and church organization and the communion. I think we have a lot to teach the evangelical world in those areas. But unity believers is a very, very biblical concept that I think we've not grasped as well. And there's some attitudes about loving each other and being kind and compassionate. And when you correct somebody, do it in the spirit of gentleness, Paul says. I think those are some New Testament practices we maybe have forgotten on our path to restoring the ancient pattern. So how do you times are different. The frontier was ripe for unity at that time. We live in a time of division. We walk the landscape of the broken pieces of a restoration dream. How do we do this today? Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to take something that I wanted to cover earlier and cover it now. Theophilus Brown Larimore. If I was named Theophilus Brown, I'd go by TB as well. Born in poverty and illegitimacy in Upper East Tennessee, baptized on his 21st birthday during the Civil War. He studied at Franklin College. You have a little bio thing on him in your booklet. Studied at Franklin College with Tolbert Fanny, graduated valedictorian, June 6, 1867. So although he is one of the great minds of his period, he did not buy into the controversies of his day. This is the time when all these divisions are starting to take place. 1871, in Florence, Alabama, he and his wife began Mars Hill College, and he had to close school in 1887 to devote himself to full-time evangelism. But he had boys that he trained at the college. It was college, the term used loosely at that point. Strigley wrote a book called Larimore and His Boys, where he would teach them and train them at the Bible, and also encourage them to work, and he encouraged them to go back home and to preach and to get a job and to be a farmer, a blacksmith, whatever. And he literally received piles of mail pleading for him to come hold protracted meetings in various places. And he just couldn't say no to these things. So he went to Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Mississippi and Louisiana and Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, California, and other places. After 17 years, he closed the school and devoted himself entirely to evangelism. So I mentioned there in the booklet, in the back of the booklet, he would go to do a gospel meeting where he would preach twice a day, 3 times on Sunday, and he would stay as long as people would come and listen to him. And so he did one gospel meeting that lasted 6 months, where he preached twice every day and 3 times on Sunday. Different lessons taught. And people would come and they would hear it. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of energy and time and effort he put into this. Yes, sir?
We had a church in Florence help support us in Wisconsin. And they had more churches in that county of Christ, churches of Christ, than they did in the whole state of Wisconsin. And it was because of this guy.
Yeah.
In school, we sent people out preaching.
He was a great church planter, absolutely. And these are the issues of the day. I know none of them speak now, but back then, instrumental music and the missionary society and the role of women and rebaptism and professional ministers. And underlying that all is our hermeneutic, our approach to reading the Scripture. How do we read and apply the Scripture? So these are some of the things that were going on, the hot issues during the day. These are the periodicals, the main ones, Gospel Advocate, American Christian Review, and the Christian Standard, that really just about everybody read, depending on what flavor of Christian you were. He started his own little periodical called The Little Angel. The angel of mercy, love, peace, and truth. He said, I come not in a dictatorial spirit, nor do I claim infallibility. Oh, that's refreshing, isn't it? No angel should be that presumptuous, for some have fallen. Being quite a youthful angel myself, with very limited experience, I shall doubtless commit many blunders. However, they shall be errors of the head and not of the heart. And as I am an independent angel, alone responsible for my utterances, you please do not expose me, but help me all you can. Love, if there be such a dweller in your heart, will constrain you to do this. But if being devoid of love, you make war upon me and try to work my ruin, I shall neither defend myself nor try to injure you. My master instructs me to love my enemies and to do good to those who despitefully use and persecute me. Wow. Talk about a breath of fresh air. And this paper gave notice. It gave notices of all the other papers from every position possible. It would take notice of, we're doing a gospel meeting. You could run it in there. It didn't matter what kind of background or what group you were with. It refused to publish anything that was unkind. So how do you think the paper did? It failed, yes. Some say that nobody, unfortunately, wants to read a paper that's not ready to get into the fight. Like to have a good scuffle in there. But Learn More showed at least it was possible to have a paper that we did not get involved with. By the way, a lot of this material comes from Doug Foster, Will the Cycle Be Unbroken? He has a chapter on T.B. Leonard Moore. It's kind of an example for this. Leonard Moore said, in 2 private letters from Mars Hill days, he gave 2 reasons for not pitching into his brothers who do not see things exactly the way he does. He said he loved some more than others and admired some more than others, but he hated no one. And he would not dispute with any of them, and he refused to basically suspect any of them of evil motives and designs. Wow, he's going to disagree with their opinions, but he's not going to accuse anybody of having bad motives. That alone will go a long way towards promoting unity.
Amen.
Isn't that the greatest command?
Yeah, you'd think so, right? I can understand how it's possible for them to act correctly and still not always do exactly as I do. Can you say that?
Those are the people who can preach without speaking.
Yeah, by their lives. I love my brethren, and long ago solemnly resolved never to go to war against them. I propose to keep my face to the common foe. I never belonged to a wing of the church or anything else. I belong to Christ. And to the church of Christ, and not to a wing of the church. So somebody wrote in during all this controversy and said, it is not best, to my humble judgment, to be silent when we see our fellow men, and especially our own family, drifting apart. Thousands of your friends believe you owe it to yourself, your family, your friends, your Savior, and your God to speak out on some matters now retarding the progress of the cause of Christ. Okay. And he published a letter. Okay. Just shows what kind of spirit he had. But his response was, I am sorry to disappoint any of my friends, but it's certainly clearly my duty to leave the discussion of all such questions to wiser, better, abler men, and to just simply preach the word. Avoiding always all questions that do gender stripes among the children of God. And preach the word he did. He baptized an estimated 10,000 people in his lifetime. Recognized by Church of Christ and disciples of Christ. When he died, they both said, hey, one of ours just passed away. They both gave him memorial services. Great tribute. And G.C. Brewer, Larimore was in no sense a partisan and he never spoke evil of any man, but he did have firm convictions. He held convictions on the innovations. He was opposed to instrumental music and the missionary society, but he never told people that. Because those were untaught issues, things about which the Bible was silent, and he took seriously where the Bible speaks, we speak, and where it's silent, we're silent. His duty was to preach Christ and the other clear teachings of the New Testament, and would remain silent on questions over which the wisest and best of men disagree. And so we talked about the great commandment. What he pointed to was the golden rule. I never called Christians or others antis, digressives, mossbacks, tackies, or trash. I concede to all, accord to all the same sincerity and courtesy I claim for myself as the golden rule demands. Wow.
Just a piece of history.
Yes.
Involving York College. Mrs. T. Thompson was one of the first matriarchs here at York College.
Okay.
And she really did teach a lot about T.B. Larimore.
Really?
His
Excellent.
philosophy has been teaching, yeah.
Very good. So she's influenced by him.
She really was.
Good to hear.
Very much so.
Can a man who simply preaches the word wheresoever he goes and whensoever he preaches, and always stands behind that proposition, be justly accused or even suspected of being responsible for discord, dissension, division, or strife among the children of God? And if all of us would reduce that proposition to practice, would we not necessarily become and be one, thus fulfilling the Lord's Prayer? And if some of us refuse to do this, thus preventing the fulfillment of that sacred prayer, then who of us are guilty? It is a fearful thing to bear such a burden of guilt as that. One of the 7 things Solomon declares to be an abomination unto God, the crown of the climax is, he that soweth discord among the brethren. So then, my brother, here are my head, my heart, my hands for peace, for scriptural peace, for honorable peace, for universal peace, for permanent peace, among all the children of God. The Bible being the basis, hence for the final fulfillment of the Lord's Prayer for Christian oneness. I like this guy. Let's not forget, along with works of the flesh in Galatians chapter 5, sexual immorality, drunkenness, impurity, orgies, hatred, jealousy, fits of anger, selfish ambition, dissensions, and factions are also listed there. So unity is an important theme that the Bible calls back to again and again and again. All right, so where are we today? Okay. Ben Foster in the book, fact is, if everyone had T.B. Larimore's attitude, the problems would never have blown up into the best of issues in the first place. So we thought, what if they had never made a statement about this or never pushed that issue? Well, we wouldn't have these. We'd have different practices in different congregations, and people would associate with different, but there would be different fellowships, refusing to fellowship some. All right, so what happened? 1906 census. Remember, disciples of Christ, 900,000, Churches of Christ, 159. Well, this is the congregations. About 8,000 disciples churches, about 2,600 Churches of Christ. Members, 982, 159. In 1906. And just a taste of what more locally, I preached in Iowa a number of years. In Iowa, okay, so Iowa is north of the Mason-Dixon line. So which of these is going to be strongest in Iowa? Disciples of Christ, yeah. So at 1906 Iowa census, 506 congregations of disciples, 23 Churches of Christ. Among members, 57,000 members of the Disciples of Christ, 1,477 the Church of Christ. And churches grew this is where we do a real quick flyover. Post-World War II, Churches of Christ experienced tremendous growth. In Iowa alone, there were 8 congregations established before 1900, 1 between 1900 and 1920, 3 between 1920 and 1940, 18 from 1940 and 1960. 5, 7, 1. Post-World War II is when Churches of Christ really began to, it was good for everybody. The economy boomed, jobs were being created, houses were being bought, families were expanding, the baby boomers came into existence. Churches of Christ rode that wave and did very well during that
I
time.
think it was during that 50s that Time had the front cover was, "The Campbellites are coming." And they did an article on.
Interesting.
That's just.
Yeah, that was talking about New York City.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we today? So Mr. Zigfus asked that question. Wait, it's going to break down Iowa. There's 42 mainline Churches of Christ. There are 8 mutual edification. That means, all right, no located preacher, because the Bible didn't have one. You know, they rode around doing it. It's your job to preach, your job to sing. Mutual edification. 6 one-cup congregations, 6 non-institutional congregations. By the way, we were talking about one-cup churches. One of the things that they all have in common, they're all very small. Imagine taking communion with 1 cup of a church of 2,000 people, right? I mean, not to mention the whole hygiene issues. You're looking up there going, oh, okay, yeah, so you want to be careful where you sit in a large congregation.
Terry?
Yes?
On your non-institutional, how are you grouping as a non-institutional?
Well, these are self-identified as non-institutional. So they do not support organizations, orphan homes, that kind of stuff. This is where the saints meet. Yes, sir.
Is there a correlation between, for example, mutual edification and educational status of the membership? Maybe that way.
I can't verify that from a research standpoint. My inclination would be to say, yes, there is. Certainly, if we talk about Christian college education, there's not going to be much of that, right? But sometimes I was preaching for a church, a mainline Church of Christ here up in Iowa, 250 members. But some Sunday afternoons, there was a mutual edification church 5 miles away. Some afternoons, I would just go and sit there, just kind of, I'm not on stage, I'm not in the spotlight. I'm just part of the group. And I would go sit among them. Just friendly people, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Terry, why did you choose Iowa?
Because that's where I was for 12 years, and I've got the data on that.
Okay.
I don't have this data for every state.
Thank you.
But if you go to like where the saints meet, they have a breakdown of state by state of Churches of Christ, and they have identifying markers there of premillennial, non-institutional, those kind of things.
Missouri, they call the non-institutional, and some of those things that you have up there is anti-church.
Yeah.
Yeah, anti-everything but up.
Right.
And that's what they.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. McNeese.
Now, that reference to the Campbellites Are Coming was Time Magazine, February 15th, 1963. And
63.
it's reference to an Exodus movement.
Yeah.
Okay,
in the late
right.
60s, where he did Exodus to...
Transplanting church from the south, taking them up north.
Northeast.
Entire congregations.
This is Exodus Bayshore. Exodus, my uncle was part of Exodus Burlington outside Boston.
Oh, really?
In the later 60s.
Yeah.
So that's where we are trying to evangelize in the Northeast.
Yes. 1963. Okay, so congregations in Iowa tend to be very small. 26 of them are less than 50. Nebraska, 29 of them are less than 50. So rural areas, small congregations, you'd expect that. Okay, religious groups in the United States, in general. What is the largest religious group in the United States?
Catholic Church.
Roman Catholics, about 68 million Roman Catholics in the United States. Followed by, distant second, Southern Baptist, 16 million. Third, surprise you. Oh, hey, you're going it. United Methodist, very good. Fourth, and here we're going, this first non-Christian group in the U.S., Jewish, 6 million Jews. And then again, in what Jews, you got Reform, you got Orthodox, you got Conservative, you got this different. Okay. Mormon, 6.1 million. Church of God in Christ, 5.5 million. Tends to be Pentecostal African American churches. Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, 4.2 million. Muslim, 3.4 million. Assemblies of God, 3 million. Presbyterian Church, 2.6 million. African Methodist Episcopal Church, 2.5 million. Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, the more conservative wing of the Lutheran Church, 2.2. Episcopal, 1.9. Church of Christ, 1.6 million. American Baptist, 1.3. Christian Church, just about several million, and Disciples of Christ, just barely over a million. But you take those three groups, Church of Christ, okay, there we go. Silence. The three restoration groups, Church of Christ, Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, now we're talking about 4 million people, almost, right? So that puts us up right up here, if we were united. And by the way, in this poll, 56 million are unaffiliated. No religious preference at all. Another problem with this is based on the 2000 edition of the Churches of Christ United States. Because since 2000, what's happened? We've gone down. We've declined 10% to 1.4 million.
Is that true across the board?
No. For most religious groups, yes, but not across the board.
Has anybody grown particularly in the past 20 years?
Well, Islam has grown because of immigration, to a large degree. Southern Baptists are down, Methodists are down, Catholic, it's up and down.
Christian Church is up.
Christian Church is up, yeah. So Christian Church, they've got they got mega churches everywhere. Largest Church of Christ, the Hills in Fort Worth, Texas, is about 4,000. It's now a multi-site congregation. So Rick Ashley will preach, but there's like 3 other congregations that will televise his sermon in that morning. So it kind of depends how you count them now. But they're about 4,000 people. But Christian churches, 10, 20,000. Yeah, they've got this mega church thing down. But Church of Christ have more congregations. They tend to be smaller. Christian churches have more large congregations.
How about all the Bible churches?
Yeah, how are the Bible churches
Community
listed?
church.
The non-denominational Bible churches, they did not figure into this particular particular survey. So I'm not sure exactly where they would fit. Because they all have some kind of background, right? I mean, Willow Creek has a Baptist background, Saddleback, the 2 largest congregations in the United States, well, except for out of Houston.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's his name?
Austin?
Yeah, Joel Osteen, yeah. 18,000, right? Okay. But it had Baptist background, right? So I think they would still count as Baptists. All right, so current stats. Church of Christ, 1.4. Independent Christian churches, about 1 million. Disciples of Christ, about 1 million. Iowa? Oh, we already did this one. Oh, okay. If the world was, if the United States was 100 people, there'd be 2 Jews, there'd be 1 Muslim, 71 Christians, there'd be 25 evangelical Protestant Christians, with Church of Christ would fall in that category, 15 mainline Protestants, 21 Catholic, 23 unaffiliated. The rise of the nuns, they are not affiliated with any religious background. By the way, of our congregation in the United States, Texas leads the way, 319,000. Number 2 is Tennessee with 200,000. Number 3? Alabama, with about 100,000. Yeah. From 2006 to 2016, so the past decade, about 58 congregations closed its doors each year, on average. Okay, so after World War II, all these congregations are being planted and sprouting up, but congregations have life cycles, just like people do. And so you have a congregation planted in 1945, post-World War, how old is it going to be now? Yeah, right? And so it's hitting the end of its life cycle. So unless something happens, all those members who got together with such excitement in 1950 to form a congregation, they're all now 80 years old. And unless they grow, then bringing new members, they're on decline. That's why churches are declining all over the United States. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know here, East Hill, in the past 20 years, since we went to a 4-year school here,
Yes, yes.
the demographic shift for East Hill has been dramatic. I can imagine East Hill would be today an aging congregation if we were still a 2-year institution here. But the fact that we went to 4-year across the board 20, 25 years ago has now meant for us that at East Hill, and you guys have been to East Hill, you know, we got kids everywhere.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
students stayed for 4 years, graduated, and stayed here and raised their family.
Which was, as I understand, part of the rationale for going to a 4-year institution, right? I mean, it would
Yeah.
help keep people up north, because what happened, people like my wife and I, we went to school here, and then we had to go somewhere else to finish up. Well, that meant going south. So we went to
We
Abilene.
stayed at East Hill with 100-plus kids under the age of 18.
Yeah.
Okay, what if that hadn't happened at York College? I think we'd probably fit more than demographic.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you're not, you study any church growth, and in order for a church to grow, they have to baptize so many people
Mhm.
out of the community,
Right,
not their
right.
families, in order to grow, even to exist, because sooner or later.
To maintain their numbers, yeah, they have to have a certain amount of, right. Because you have people dying, right? And so you have to have people coming in somehow. The average attendance of congregation, Church of Christ in the United States is 94. 54% of the congregations average 34 people on Sunday morning. So about half the congregations are 30s. I love maps. Percentage of population claimed by, are you religious? Doesn't matter what flavor, what kind, are you religious? Right? So blue, 35% and less claim to be religious. Yellow, 75% or more claim to be religious. What do you notice? Midwest, right? Right through the heartland here. Texas to North Dakota, and what's that?
Mormons.
Yeah, Utah, right? So you got this great section of religious involvement here throughout the midsection. So when politicians talk about flyover country, that's what we're talking about right there. By the way, there's a religious survey done every 10 years now. It's 2010, so 2020 will be the next one. We're looking forward to that data coming out, see what the changes are. But again, the same kind of map, any religious involvement, the dark blue, 50 or 80% or more have a religious commitment, religious involvement. So again, through the heartland in Utah, 80% or more. Largest participating religious group, county by county. What's the largest religious group in your county? The blue is Catholic. The red is Southern Baptist. Yes. The gray is Church of Christ of Jesus Latter-day Saints. Yes. Now take Catholics out of the picture. Let's just talk about Protestants. Ooh. Southern Baptist. See why they get that name? Southern Baptist. The blue, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America.
Could you go back to the previous map, please? Indiana is interesting.
It is interesting. Why is it interesting?
Well, it seems to have a concentration of us, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it's kind of hodgepodge, yeah. Like kind of one of those border states, right?
Alaska's interesting.
It is, yeah. Okay, so Protestants now. Yes. Catholics, percentage of all residents, this is a county by county basis. So if it's red, more than 50% of the county is Catholic. You see it down here, here. Okay, now these Catholics are very different than these Catholics, right? Because these Catholics come from where?
Ireland.
Yeah, these are European immigrants, right? Ireland. These Catholics coming from
Hispanic.
Latin America. Yeah, so they're coming up from there. They come up from there. Very different practices, very different, cultures, but they're all Catholic. Same thing. More than 50%, dark blue. Baptists?
This is western Montana, I'm a Montanan, and that would be the Indian missionaries.
Oh, okay. Yes. Southern Baptist. This is 2000 data on this particular one, but I like the graphics on it. It really shows more than 50% Southern Baptist. Yeah, dark red more than 5% dark red. Each dot represents a Southern Baptist congregation. You can't swing a Bible without having Southern Baptist down south, right? Now, keep in mind when we see things like this. Keep in mind that this area is pretty sparsely populated anyway. You're talking Wyoming, Montana, so you're not going to have many. It's not just not part of demographics. It's just part of the demographics of the population. So a cartogram says, instead of mapping things based on geography, what if we did a map of the United States based on different data? Income levels, or educational levels, or religious preference. If the United States was shaped based on religious preference, it would be the United States of the South, right? Of it, Southern Baptist, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. What can you not see in there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Where's Nebraska? Where's, Northeast? Where's Massachusetts? Okay. Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Okay. Where do these people come from? Scandinavian countries, right? Left the frozen, cold European countries and traveled across the United States. They came to a frozen, barren wasteland and said, yeah, this looks like home. Yeah, let's stay here, huh? I can live a miserable life here. And so they began to farm in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, that's Evangelical Lutheran Church. It's more liberal wing, more conservative wing. There's the Lutheran congregations, each red dot. 50% or more was dark country. United States of Minnesota and Wisconsin. If this is based on Lutheran population. Methodists. Kind of centrally located, again, for the heartland. Mennonites, Pennsylvania, Montana, South Dakota. Mennonite congregations.
How do they, that's Mennonite, that's not
Yeah.
Amish, I'm sorry.
No. Episcopal Church congregations. Remember we talked about most of the presidents were Episcopalian, in the Northeast, right there, still strong. United States of Episcopalians, look like this.
Nebraska.
Yeah, we're in Nebraska. Mormon Church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, dark, 5% or more. Let's tighten this a little bit. 50% or more, or I'm sorry, 25% or more, dark red. So Utah. 25% more, county by county. United States of Utah. Look like that. Here we go. The disciples of Christ. 25% or more. You got a few counties where it's red. Mostly 1 to 5%. Get kind of through this area right here. It's disciples of Christ. Church of Christ. Disciples of Christ. Church of Christ. Disciples of Christ. Church of. What do you notice? Further south, right? Church of Christ stronger in the further south. Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. Disciples of Christ. 5% or more, again, right through the heartland there. Christian churches, independent Christian churches. Church of Christ. Let's do that again. Disciples, independent Christian churches, Church of Christ.
From Nashville to Abilene.
Yeah, that's right. Which we call the Bible Belt, right? obvious reasons.
What's in the, go back to
The
that.
United States, the Church of Christ would look like this. Welcome to Tennessee, Texas, and a few other states.
Go back to that map before. What's in central Nebraska? Is that Kearney, Grand Island?
Right there.
Yeah,
That would Grand Island looks like it to me, doesn't
Grand
it?
Island and Kearney and.
Think, yeah. Of course, it's 1 to 5%. York actually is about 5% Church of Christ. Well, the dominant is Lutheran in York, Nebraska. Okay, so if we do the cardiogram, yeah, that's what this would look like. Here we go. Yeah, so we come to the end of our journey here, and we say, look at all these different religious groups out here. We tend to say, here we came along and got things right. That's the kind of story I grew up here. We're the ones that finally figured out how things to do right. But I think maybe we've seen, perhaps, through our little journey here, maybe that's not a real good, healthy way of looking at things. And the fact that Jesus called for unity among his followers says that's not a healthy way of looking at things, right? That we need to try to overcome some of those differences, which means an attitude change, right? We can disagree about some things, about some practices and things. We don't have to say you're not a Christian because of that. So the attitude change, the ability to tolerate differences of opinion and still call them brothers and sisters in Christ, is something it's going to take if we're ever going to be united. Because right now it's looking kind of depressing when we're talking about being united, right? Okay, so final closing thoughts. We got 1 minute.
Thank you.
What do you got?
What are our issues now?
We got no issues. Time's up. Okay, let's go to lunch, everybody. Yeah, you think about applying these principles to, okay, we talk about some of these things are still with us, some of these things, premillennialism. Some people talked about it in a very, very small group. Missionary societies, nobody's dividing about that anymore. Some Bible class in schools, nobody's dividing about that. Instrument music, yes, ma'am, a very big issue. But look what's happening. Some of our large congregations are now somewhat instrumental and some a cappella. The Hills Church, Richland Hills in Texas, it has 4 services. 2 or 3 are with instruments. 1 is a cappella. Same congregation. We're one family. Women's role. And by the way, if you want to explore that a little bit, Rick Ashley, who preaches there, did a great series when this first came out, when it first started happening 6-7 years ago, a 3-week series called Both and Church, where he talks about the science of scriptures and how, okay, instruments, it's not mentioned in the Bible. He said, yeah, that's true, but this group says Sunday school is not mentioned in the Bible, and that's true. And this group says kitchens aren't mentioned in the Bible, and that's true. And this group says, and it just goes down the line there and said, where do you make that distinction? The silence of Scripture, if the silence of Scripture is prohibitive, we are all blowing it, right? Because we're doing all kinds of things that are not in the Bible, beginning with having church buildings in the first place. So we need to have a better approach to the silence of Scripture. So I think we're making progress, where we're bringing some unity back. Some of the heat has dropped from this discussion, and I know personally, 20 congregations that have instrumental and a cappella worship services at the same church. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that one of the reasons we're losing so many of our kids in the Church of Christ is they are marrying outside of the church, whereas with the Catholics, there's a lot of pressure on those kids to marry within the Catholic Church? So it seems, is the marriage factor one of the reasons that we're losing so much of our kids?
Let me throw it back out at you. What do you think?
I think it has to do a lot with what's being taught in colleges around, or even lower grades now, the liberalism, et cetera, that's been taught as far as Christianity or the negative attitudes, or you're not allowed to talk about it at all. And I think that's hurting some of the young people, because if you don't get it at home, the only other place they're likely to get it is from people they admire, such as instructors in their schools.
Yes.
We've done a study within our own congregation, the Southeast Church of Christ, which is a fairly large Church of Christ.
Southeast Church where?
In the Houston, Texas.
Houston, okay.
Friends with. And interviewed some of our people, the kids who have grown up in the congregation, but when they got to the college young professionals, have started either going to a community church or to Baptist church. And in the greatest majority of those, they're very faithful in their beliefs. But when we're getting to that age group, there wasn't anything that was meeting their needs in the congregation there. And they weren't meeting, the guys weren't meeting girls they were interested in and vice versa. And so they were going to mission trips that the Baptist church was doing, community groups that had good outreach for their age group, and they were meeting their spouses there. And so they're very active, faithful, in these other congregations, not the Church of Christ, because we're falling short in that college, or the kids that go off to Christian college, come back home, blah.
Right. And that's true, by the way, across the board. Every religious group, when kids hit their 18 to 20, early 20s, there's a dip there in attendance. It's true across the board. But I think one of the things you pointed out there was that the issues our kids have today are different issues. I don't have, maybe two students who care all about instrumental music, one way or the other. That their preferences, but willing to fight about it? No. Premillennialism, they don't even know how to spell it. But, are you taking care of the poor?
Yeah.
Can we do a mission trip where we do something like that? Are you active in the community? Those are the kind of things our kids are concerned about today. So we're going some old arguments about some old issues. They're like, I don't care. Call him a pastor, don't call him a pastor. I don't care. I don't want to know. What are we doing to help out those who are needy? Right? And so I think we got different issues with children today. Yes, ma'am.
I've noticed in my home church, which is Trail Church of Christ in Cunningham, that parents who raise their children in the church, who bring them, don't send them, who are involved, who do things like go on mission trips or hand out sandwiches to the poor or this or that, and keep their kids. These kids, as they grow, they have a better view, you might say, of what a husband and a father is, because of the family unit
Example that was
they
set.
have at home. And we have seen a lot of them. And they do not leave, they have not left the church. They left home, but not the church, because they have that two-person family to look at and go, that makes sense.
And I think what you mentioned here is an excellent practice, which I would suggest all of us do. Talk to them. Do an official survey, or just sit down and have coffee with them and say, tell me, what's going on? What do you and your friends believe and why? And what is it that's meeting your needs and what's not? Because that's really the way to find out. Because you can't take a paintbrush and just say, all millennials are like this, all Gen X are like this. They have their differences, right? But how are you going to know what those are unless we actually sit down and talk with them and find out, what are your major concerns? If you could, I had them do an exercise in my class. If you could create a church on your own, what kind of things would be important to you? What are your important issues that you would like to see evolve? And ask those kind of questions, have those kind of conversations, and then listen to what they say. Yes.
I think we need to keep in mind, those of us who are our age, that the younger generation is facing issues that we did not face.
Absolutely.
We stared the denominations down. They're going to have to stare down world religions.
Yeah.
And we forget that they are facing problems that we never faced.
Correct.
Give them a break.
Yeah.
And I suspect if there is a revival of the restoration, it will be because that generation has to face the world religions, not just people who basically believe like they do but practice a little different.
Here, let me end on this, because I want to end on a positive note, that most denominations are down. Baptist, Methodist, Church of Christ are down. The group that's increasing, the nuns and the non-denominational, I think that still could appeal to our students, because they're saying, I don't care about the history, the heritage. I just want to be a Christian. You know what? I know somebody else who said that. Yeah. Let me introduce you to. I think we can sell this idea of non-denominational Christianity, if we can just learn to actually practice it and live it out. Right? Instead of just becoming another group among many who claim to have the Bible right, we can say, let's offer an alternative approach that says we want to be just Christians, but not the only Christians. Yes, sir.
I still think there's a big difference in the instrumental music part. For hundreds of years, there were no instruments of music, just
Sure.
a cappella singing. And the church does say, sing. And so I don't think that falls in the same category as whether we should have a kitchen or whether we should have some of these other issues.
Yeah, but somebody who thinks that kitchen is an issue would disagree with you on that. You know, I mean, it's the same arguments. There were never any kitchens up until 1800s.
They've
and
had
so-
people's homes, and I think those homes had kitchens.
Sure, yeah, I would think so.
I would think so.
Let's all be.
Well, speaking of kitchens, I'm getting hungry. Yeah, so I think it's about noontime, and Gail has the plan for dismissal.